Good morning and welcome to the Fire in the Belly. We have another boardroom talk with the outstanding Pat Slattery. So good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Pete.
Thank
Good
you
to be
very
here.
much.
Lovely fresh morning.
Fresh morning there. You're sitting beside the sea. So listen,
Absolutely.
you couldn't be any happier, right?
I know you have it.
So we picked a wee topic today. So we're going to be talking a bit of both, actually. And I gave you a choice of both. And as you said before, it's like kind of one seems to go hand in hand with the other. So I'll let you explain that. But the two topics we'd chosen was one was congruence and the other one was flow. So Pat, if you'd be kind enough to give us your thoughts on congruence and flow.
Yeah. Well. I mean, look. Again, when we discussed this topic and you shared this topic with me, I thought, okay, well, how can I talk about this for a while, right? And as I was thinking about congruence and what congruence means to me, and what flow would mean, they kind of go hand in hand in ways. And I'll explain this as I go through here this morning, in my opinion, and what I'm thinking about this. And again, everything I say here is just my opinion. And what I believe I try to do for people, and my intention is to simplify this as much as possible. I don't want to get caught up in science or get caught up in the weird or the world definitions of certain things. I want to give it to what I've seen from a practical level. So, now again, when we talk about congruence in psychology and NLP, right, congruence can be defined as a rapport within oneself, or internal and external consistency perceived by others as sincerity or certainty. Now, that's a bit of a tongue twister, right? But quite simply, for me, congruency is a state in which a person's ideal self and actual experience are consistent, or at least very similar. Okay, so and I'll get into some examples as we talk about this morning. But for me, I feel that it's rare for a complete state of congruence to exist, and that all people experience a certain amount of incongruence. Okay, so now again, bearing in mind that every individual has an individual personality. Okay, and the personality is, I think we mentioned before, we're talking about, and when I'm using the analogy of a triangle, because we get into the mathematics to talk about congruency is in triangles, right? But in my opinion, again, the personality is like a triangle made up of the real self, the perceived self, and the ideal self. Okay, so the real self, if you like, is the person they are on a day-to-day basis, the behavior that they involve themselves in or choose to participate in, the person you might meet and chat to and work on the street or at home, etc. The person who on the outside and how they behave on a day-to-day basis is their real self. Okay, the perceived self, in my opinion, is imaginary. It's who they think they are. Now, I mean this respectfully, but I know a lot of people say, who do they think they are, right? And because they don't behave in the same way. But who they think they are, the Walter Mitty, if you like, right? The Walter Mitty's of the world, the people who think they're something different but behave in a completely different way. But having a perception of who they are while behaving in a completely different manner than to who they think they are, if that makes sense, right? So that's the perceived self, in my opinion. Then we have the ideal self. That's the person that they wish to become. The person that when they think of being, that they light up in the field of magic. The person that they purposely practice being on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so when there's a good fit between all three components, the person has congruence, and this is a healthy state of being and helps people continue to progress towards self-actualization. And when we start looking and thinking about this, because you're going to play all those three parts of the self are going to come into play within everybody's personality, in my experience. Okay, now some people have come to me and said, well, actually, no, that's not the truth. Here's the way I feel. Well, then I believe then I'm just talking to the perceived self again, right? So, because there are none of us perfect. We may be practically perfect, but not completely.
That perceived self, are you taking that from the person that's speaking? Is it from their perception, or is the reflected perception?
It can be both, Pete. And the reality is everything, when we have the perceived self, if somebody's reflecting the perceived, if somebody decides they have a perception of who Mighty Pete is, what they believe you are, well, maybe it's a mirror image of what they see. It's what their perception has nothing to do with you, right? So they're coming from their perceived self, if that makes sense. right? So this is not, and I think what's really important here, because when we talk about congruency and incongruency, sometimes we're going to talk about the conflict in a little while, right? And of course, the criticism and the blame and the judgment. When somebody's coming from a place of blame or criticism or judging, whether it's the person who perceives you to be a certain way or they perceive themselves to be a certain way, then they're in that blame game, or they're in that place of judgment, right? Or and really and truly, the only person that is in that space is the person who's creating the blame or creating the criticism or judging at that particular time. And in my opinion, that's somebody who's in their perceived self too, right? Because, you know, if I was to sit here, Pete, and say, you know what, Pete, you're not mighty, actually. You're not great at all, right? Then I have to ask myself, am I being congruent with my better self, the person that I want to be, right? Or if I have to sit there and judge you when I say something about you, does that mean that I'm coming from my place that I think I'm better than you, and you're not as good as me, or you're not who you think you are? So is that giving the perception that I think I'm better? So am I living in that perceived space? Now, this is really important as we go on this morning. We have this conversation for people, because people are going to recognize people, and they're going to recognize people who behave in certain ways and how they make you feel, etc. Now, again, I got to say to people here, because I got to be very cautious in ways, right, to make sure that I communicate my message as clearly as I possibly can, so it's not misinterpreted. Okay, and that when whoever's listening and whoever's reading this or watching this will actually sit back and think about it and be able to think for themselves, without judgment, without criticism, without blame. And the reason I say this, because sometimes when you might identify a person that's behaving in a way that's not congruent with your own values, and you might find yourself surrounded with them, you might discover that you may need to make some changes in your life. But I will say, here is the disclaimer: that is ultimately your own decision. Whatever comes to light for you, but it is your absolute decision. I don't advise anybody on what actions to take. My goal here today is to be able to dig deeper and allow you the opportunity to dig deeper for you and see what comes up for you, and you make your decisions based on your true experiences. Okay, your true experiences. And it's only when you operate from your true experiences are you congruent with your core values. But my values are my values.
I mean, that ties in lovely with, when we were talking about the truth as well, talking about your truth, and seeing a pure reflection of yourself, which can be hard.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, how is it possible to be congruent if you don't come from the truth? Right? So I mean, there are so many meanings and so many things we could bring to that word congruent. And of course, how could you be in flow if you're not coming from your truth? Right? So, again, when we understand to creating that good fit, because remember, nobody is perfect. So you're going to have those three personalities, or those three traits of your personality are going to come into play, and that's okay, by the way, as long as you understand how you make it, how you use it, and how you channel it in the right direction. Okay, so for me, congruence to me is making a statement of intent. Okay, however, but only if you have an expectation that the outcome matches the intent. Right? Because if you were to think about the perfect triangle, if we were going to mathematics, and if you have the perfect triangle, if you fold that triangle in half, each half should absolutely match the other. It actually forms two perfect triangles. Right? So it's no different when whatever you think about and the things that you want to achieve, the desires you have, your actions have to match it. That's the other side of that triangle. So now, again, when the outcome doesn't match the intent, there may be feelings of being incongruent. Now, the reason I want to share this, because I believe that some people will recognize something within themselves and what I talk about here today. And by the way, this talk this morning is all about within yourself. It's not about anybody else. This is specifically in the past. In some of our other previous talks, we've talked about how people we've talked about what you're recognizing yourself, but also to recognize other outside behaviors. Now, You may recognize them from here, but ultimately this is about yourself. Okay, so because when I say when the outcome doesn't match the intention, there may be feelings of incongruent. Now, what does this mean when I say that, and what usually happens then? And questions I want you to put to yourself, or the questions I wanted to answer for myself, and I wanted to get a better understanding of this. So if there's a feeling of being incongruent, what does it mean and what usually happens? And questions I asked were, do people feel like failures? Do they feel like they have lost their mojo or their flow, right? And if so, what behaviors come from that? Now, because if you have these feelings of being incongruent, we already know that feelings create action, right? And if you're having that feeling of being incongruent, and you feel like you've lost your mojo or lost your flow, if that happens, what behavior comes from that? And from that behavior, once you start that behavior and you start the flow of behavior, what do people believe then? What becomes your belief? And this is why I want people to understand the importance of congruence and how it impacts and affects everything. So, do they think they are failures if they feel themselves behaving in a way that they feel incongruent? Do they think their behaviors? Do they give in? And when people give in, right, if people give in, if people think they're failures, and if they do this, does this conflict with their core values? Now, if something conflicts with your core values, then you have to ask yourself, does this then create a behavior that is not congruent with your intentions? So when you hear me say that you use the word congruent, I mean, they're not congruent. You got to figure out what's actually really going on. Because you can't live a perfect life wearing two faces, right? And you can't have the perfect triangle if they're both are, you can't have a matching if they're both opposite sizes and opposite shapes. So when we look at being congruent and creating that flow, we have to find that balance that we often talk about. But we also have to understand that we have to get involved in the process. So to be congruent or to be in flow, you must mirror your thoughts and words with action. Now, this is where I'm going to, I suppose, dig a little bit deeper, okay? Because when we talk about mirroring your thoughts and your words with action, and I met a lot of people, and I know a lot of people, over 26 plus years, I worked with a lot of people. And I meet people who talk and use that term flow a lot. And people who talk about intentions a lot. And then I meet a lot of people who, and I will share some stories, maybe some ideas here with you guys later this morning that may get you thinking a bit differently about this. But in my opinion, to be in flow, you must mirror your thoughts and words with action. You can't have one without the other if you want to be congruent in life and in your activities as well. So the question I ask people sometimes, are you flowing with the current? And I hear people say, I'm in flow, or I'm just going to go with the flow. And when you go with the flow, are you flowing with the current? Are you being led in a direction where you have no idea where you're going to end up? And I mean this respectfully, I've discovered that most people are. And again, simply because of finding themselves operating in a way that is incongruent, that they start to give in, they lose their mojo, they think they're failures. And they discover meditation then in a way to help them. And I'm a huge believer in meditation, by the way. But it's not enough. It's not enough on its own. There's more. Your thoughts, your feelings, your words got to be backed up with action. And I will share some tools with you at the end of this talk that you can use for this. Because the reality is, I say to people, if you're sitting in flow, if you feel that you're in flow, are you being led in a direction where you have no idea where you will end up? And again, most people are. Not all people, but most people. And most people have a wish or a dream, and then they share them. And I suppose then to use a phrase that's kind of often used, they put it out there and see what happens, expecting the universe to deliver. And these are terms that I've listened to and I've heard many, many times. Now, this does work sometimes in mysterious ways. Sometimes. However, experience has taught me from working with tens of thousands of people over the past 26 plus years that it is rare that just putting it out there works. Okay. Now, the question is why? Why is that the case? And I believe this simply because most people, and again, I mean this respectfully, imagine their ideal, then they share it with the world, they meditated on it for a short period of time each day. And unfortunately, they do the opposite throughout their day. Now, that's not congruent with their intention. Now, this does create flow, by the way, but not the flow in the direction towards the desired outcome.
Well, there was something there, because in that sort of triangle, and I'm just cautious, or I'm curious, sorry, in terms of whether, you talked about where actions don't match your intentions or where the outcome doesn't match your intentions. And I'm just wondering there, if you get a difference between your actions and the outcome, is that a potential twist in your intentions?
Well, sometimes that will change. Sometimes your intentions will change because we're forever growing, right? We're forever growing, and your intention will change because your true self will change. You start believing in yourself a little bit more, and this is part of the journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It's part of your journey. It's part of your learning, and then as you're starting to grow, if you allow yourself to really be congruent and get into flow, and into flow in the direction of where you want to be at, you start discovering more. Now, this is not mysterious, by the way. Right? It just makes absolute sense, doesn't it? That if you do more of the things that you want to do, and you do it in a way that you set up good intention and you pay attention to it and get involved, then the likelihood is the laws of probability. When we talk about the laws of the universe, right? The laws of probability says that you will probably achieve what it is you wanted to achieve. So what's next? You're still in your real self, but you're moving into a different place within there. It's a constant flow. It's a constant journey. And that's where I believe everybody should be moving towards, is being their real self. And when when you be your real self, you consistently grow. So will change, and your intention will change. And whatever that is for you, by the way, this is not being judgmental. People have different intentions and they have different things they want to do in the world and different things they want to achieve. And that's okay. As long as you create congruency and flow in that process, then you're growing, then you're in your real self. And I always suggest that people do grow and continue to grow and change. Because when do you achieve your ideal? And I have a good friend of mine who said, the day that they're kicking dirt down on me in the ground, and they'd say, you know what, he done well. He treated his kids well. He spoiled his kids. He took care of everybody. He done his best, and he lived his life. Because up until that point, the world is changing. You're changing. You're evolving. So if you're being your real self, my opinion is that you consistently need to grow. Otherwise, you're living a life, maybe, I don't know, just to keep somebody else happy, right? So growth to me is part of being your real self.
Just give us a quick overview, because I know it's something we've covered, but it might be useful to summarize it again in terms of why there would be a gap between yourself and then your true self or your real self? What creates that gap?
Okay, sorry, ask me that again now.
So, because you sort of talk about going back to your real self, whether and I think you talked about it, whether if you've lost your mojo or you feel like a failure, or people sort of going, I don't feel like myself. When there is a gap between who you are today and actually who you truly are or your real person, how has that gap served you? I suppose is the question to look at it, because it could be positive or it could be negative, right?
Yeah, well, it is only what you perceive it to be, right? Whether it's a positive or negative, And actually, I have a note here that I'm going to cover on that in a little bit. So I suppose when we think about people doing the opposite throughout the day, just not congruent with their intention, this, as I said, it does create a flow, but it's a flow in the wrong direction of their desired outcomes. So now, so why does it happen? Really, I guess is what you're asking. Right. So, like, if we have to figure out why it happens, it makes no sense that if a person wants something bad enough, and if they have a very strong desire for something, that they would do the opposite of what it takes to have it, right? Okay. So okay, let me share then, I suppose, my 26 years of working with people and studying human behavior and what it has taught me. So, usually, again, it's because there's a conflict. Now, what do I mean by this? I have met many, many, many people who have told me that they're frustrated, they're disheartened, they're anxious, they feel lost, they have no direction, they lost their passion, or sometimes they feel they're just existing, right? And I could go on many other things that were shared. Now, here's how we figure out what's going on, because what I do is I ask them is, what is it that they truly want? And for most people, but not all, by the way, they respond by saying that they don't know. They don't know what they truly want. Now, I don't necessarily believe that to be the truth, right? So I kind of dig a little bit deeper, as you know I do, right? So usually what happens after a few other questions and maybe a short conversation, they begin to dream again. And now that's what lights me up, because when I see people begin to dream again, visibly they begin to light up. They start to use their imagination once more. They see their vision. And as they do this, I ask them, what does this mean to them? And then I ask a question: what will life be like if, if, a very small word with a huge meaning, if they could live the life that they dream about? Sometimes, visibly, I see them smile when I ask that question, because again, their imagination is beginning to kick in. Some don't smile, but it does light a spark, right? We're on the Fire in the Belly program to understand it lights that spark, but they all light up. And once they start to share how life would be like if they lived the life of their dreams, and once we get them into that flow, we got to keep them there, right? The words that people use, like it would be magical. I'd be so happy. I would love life again. I would love myself. I would be able to make a better difference in the world for me, for my family, for my friends, and so on. And this is what usually comes back to me. And then, of course, I drop the bombshell. And I might ask them, so what's stopping you? So if you're listening to this morning, and if this is beginning to resonate with you, what's stopping you? Now, usually, when I ask that question, the smile drops again. And then I get the story. And the story could be, I'm surrounded by so many negative people. That's usually the most common one, believe it or not. And I have spoken to a lot of people in this. And usually the most common one is, I'm surrounded by so many negative people. Then as we get into it, people go, well, I'm afraid of what people might think of me. Or I'm afraid of what people might say to me and what they might say about me. And usually that leads on to, I'm afraid of how I might be treated. So here begins the conflict. When people start thinking like this, they take this on, and this becomes a very strong belief for people. They believe that people are not going to say something good about them. They believe that they're not going to be treated too well because they've had an experience maybe of this already. Because most people tell me that they're surrounded by so many negative people. Now, when we are surrounded by negative people like this, I want to clarify something. Because I've seen negative people, if we want to use that term, negative people, they're just living in the same fear, by the way, I believe. They're fear driven. And usually, when you're surrounded by negative people, one of the tools that they become masters at using is sarcasm. And they use sarcasm because they don't understand it and they're afraid of it. And they're probably in a space where they need to move out of too. And they're driven by the same fears that the person they're being sarcastic about might be driven about. So they express it. So they're now behaving in a way that's probably not congruent with their own wishes. So we're in a world surrounded by a lot of people who lived a very incongruent life. Because I don't know too many people who genuinely, purposely want to hurt people and upset people and stop people from dreaming. I know very few people who actually don't have a dream or a goal or a vision or a passion or something they want to do. But because of all the stories, whatever story that they've downloaded and has become their reality and taken on board to be the truth, or they don't believe it to be the truth, actually, most people I've discovered. But unfortunately, because that conflict is so strong, most people do not do what they would need to do if they were to be the person living their desired life. So it's the belief systems, I believe, are major issue, cause so much conflict around people being congruent in to their true selves. And when this happens, their actions are not congruent with their desires. And this, in my opinion, unfortunately, is why so many people live an unfulfilled life. They're letting someone else, maybe their environment or their circumstances, decide the direction of their flow. Now think about that. If you're living in any of those stories, if that's the story you're living in, are you letting someone else, maybe your environment, your circumstances, or something else, a third party in some ways, decide the direction of your flow? So you got to back your feelings, your thoughts, your words with action. You have to create the perfect side on both sides, or as close as possible, by the way. It never gets really perfect because, as you said, we're consistently growing. We're changing, right? We're changing the goalposts. As you start to grow, you keep changing the goalposts, right? So by letting other people or other circumstances decide the direction of your flow, most people are going to live an unfulfilled life. So when I get deeper into conversation with people and they start to open up, they usually do say, well, actually, I do have a goal, right? Now they start getting defensive, right? I do have a goal. I have a wish list. I have something I've always dreamed about doing. I said, well, so why aren't you doing it? And again, it comes back to them. Oh, at this point, some people get a little bit frustrated, right? Or some people, and why do people get frustrated? Because they're not congruent. That's nothing to do with me, by the way, and I mean that respectfully. That's, and so you got to really challenge this when you got to dig deeper, because anybody can do this, by the way. Anybody can change their life and become whatever it is they want and have the desires they want. And I'm going to share some tools with you to help you do that. So when I get deeper into that conversation and they do open up, and and you can see, the shoulders are going back, and as well, actually, I have a goal, I have a wish list. And when I ask them why, they go, well, I would do it, but you see, the buts. Remember the buts, right? The buts come in, and I only discussed this, I think, yesterday on a call, right? The buts. I can't because when there's a conflict, I want to, but I'm not smart enough. Now, this is not the truth. Because if you can imagine a possibility and imagine an outcome, a desired outcome, sometimes what happens, you see here, is that people get challenged, right? I've seen this many times, right? Integrity, Pete, will be something really important to you. Really important to you. And integrity is very important to most people. Now, here's a conflict that comes up for people who want to live a life of integrity. A term that we use, by the way, and when I heard it being used so many times, is imposter syndrome. How is it an imposter syndrome? Where does that come from? That's nothing to do with you. But what happens is your environment, people you're surrounded with, those negative people, if you like, the sarcasm that comes. Sure, what would you know about that? You're only a property. What are you at talking about mindset stuff? Podcasting, what's all that about? What would you know about podcasting? Sure, all you know all this property. And all of a sudden, boom, conflict. And you start feeling like an imposter. And that's not congruent with your goals or your dreams. That's not your true self. Now, you'll still do what you do because you have a desire for it, but you'll consistently challenge yourself then. Right? So you're creating a conflict. So the outcomes are not mirroring exactly what you truly feel and what you truly want to happen, because you're allowing that conflict in the middle to get in the way. So to be congruent, you got to live it, you got to be it, you got to do it regardless of circumstances, regardless of the outcomes, regardless of the people, regardless of your situation. You got to mirror it by your behavior. Wholeheartedly, you got to give it regardless. And understand those with the sarcasm are just living in that fear, and they're just giving it to you now. Right? It's a big hump in their back. They don't want it. Let's give it to you. And you take it on board because you go, geez, maybe I'm an imposter. Maybe. So that third party conflict is what creates that incongruency. So when I talk to people again and they go, I want to, I have something I've always dreamed about doing, but I can't because I want to make it happen, but I'm not smart enough. I want to, but people won't let me. I want to make this happen, but the bank has my hands tied. I'm scared it won't work out. But I'm not smart. Others, by the way, have told me that. How do I know I'm not smart enough? Because people have told me. Now, you may not answer it that way, but this is what's running in the back of the mind, right? This is the conflict. It's not congruent with your values, because if it's not congruent with your values, you're going to feel it like nothing else. And it's very disheartening. And this is why people lose their mojo, lose their passion, start to feel anxious. It's based on the information that they're downloading from an outside source that's creating the conflict with their true self. So I'm going to suggest you let that go. And ask yourself, this is my true self, this is my goal. And you imagine it like two mirrors. And if you were to put them side by side, would they reflect something similar? If not, then you're not living your true self. You're living a life of conflict that's not congruent to who you are, based on other people's opinions, other people's behaviors, other people's beliefs. Maybe you've taken on board other people's beliefs that you need to let go of in order for you to be congruent and actually flow in the direction that you want to flow. Again, people say we're going through a pandemic. There are no opportunities. How do you know there are no opportunities? Here's what happens. Generalization. Because everyone says so. Really? So who's everyone? And then they start thinking of a few people, those negative people in their environment. And I'm not passing judgment on those people either. They're buying into this nonsense from somewhere else. I understand for some people, if they can think differently, it may be more difficult to see the opportunity. But I promise you this, if you get involved in the process and change your behaviors, and you allow yourself to think of possibilities and feel those possibilities and match them with actions, you're going to get somehow, you're starting to change the direction of your flow. in the direction that you want it to go. And you don't do this on your own. You surround yourself with the right people. You step up. So when we start understanding the buts, you need to understand that this type of thinking is not congruent with your goals or your desired outcomes. Now, I could go on. I could go on and on and on with this for a long time, right? But I'm sure that some of you are recognizing some of what I'm talking about right now. So again, if we were to write down the word buts, B-U-T-S, write down the word buts. Now let's look at what the buts for what they truly are. The buts usually start and end with truths. It's the stuff in the middle, in my opinion, are the lies or beliefs that people are creating for themselves. The conflict. Conflict is always in the middle. Third party conflict is always somewhere in the middle, right? So if you were to think about, the truths, the truth always comes before the buts, by the way. The truth always comes before the buts. So pay attention to the truth. If you say, I have a dream, that's the truth. I have a wish list, that's the truth. I have something that I've always dreamed about doing, that's the truth. I want to make a difference in this world. I want to change people's lives, that's the truth. I want to make a lot of money, that's the truth. But when the but comes, now comes the lie. Okay, so the truth always comes before the but. Remind yourself of that, because sometimes you got to go back to the truth. Because when you get stuck in the middle, right, we've heard this term, I got stuck in the middle of the stuff. When you're stuck in the middle of stuff, it's very hard to recognize the truth. You recognize the stuff that you're stuck in. And usually it's what's going on in the middle, because you also know that once you have the dream and you share that, you can see that outcome. You know what it's going to feel like if you get it, right? Because I've already asked people, what would life be like if you could live the life that you dream about? And you can see that, and because when you've seen yourself there, you can look into that future and think, wow, that's what I really want. So what stops you from the idea to making it a reality is what's going on in the middle. And when most people pay attention to what's going on in the middle, I want you right now, if you've written down the word buts, shade out the two letters in the middle, shade them out, scribble them over them. And then what are you left with? BS, right? That's what the middle creates, is the BS. So you got to get rid of the BS. So next time you ask yourself, or you find yourself using that word but, you're not being congruent with your true values, what it is you truly want in the life that you really desire. That wish that you have, that dream, the difference you want to make. If you use that word but, now the conflict is coming in, and there's where we have lack of congruence. And not only that, it breaks the flow. Right? You're putting a dam in the middle. It's up to you to take it down or build it up. It's your choice. So anytime you use that word but, ask yourself, what BS are you telling yourself? What lie are you focused on here? The moment you use that word but, and you got to be conscious about this. You got to consciously think about this and be very much aware. Because if you understand that the truth always comes before the BS, whatever you dream possible is the truth. Then be congruent with your actions. So what can you do? Now, I want to share with you some tools, some tips that may help you think differently. So firstly, I have an article that I give to a lot of people I work with, and it's called Choose to Grow Bigger Than Your Challenges. And I use the word choose very purposefully here. Because once you understand that consciousness of choice, which we've discussed in a previous talk, you will realize it is your choice. You can choose to grow bigger than your challenges. And your challenges are usually the things that break the flow, or things that are happening that make it incongruent for you to be living the life that you desire. Now, sometimes in order to do that, you got to declare your goal, set out your intention, whatever it may be. And once you declare it, you're taking the first step towards achieving it. Now, taking that first step is a good start, but the very instant you make that decision and take the step, something is going to come up, right? Conflict. Maybe it's sarcasm from somebody, maybe it's your circumstances, maybe something, but something is going to come up, a challenge that you will likely need to face. It could be a fear, it could be an obstacle, it could be an external challenge or circumstances that you didn't foresee. So when fears and obstacles and circumstances arise, it is usually what happens for people. It's easy to go into panic mode and to contract and retreat again. And this is what I find most people do. And then again, they're not living their true selves. But we have to be aware that this happens. Okay. Now, if you do this, you will end up feeling like you've tried and failed. And when you feel like that, you're probably worse off than you were when you started. So in addition to not achieving the goal that you wanted, you're also feeling bad about yourself, right? Now, when you feel bad about yourself, it's conflicting, because if you're somebody, let's say, love and compassion are strong values, and you feel bad about yourself, you're not feeling like you're loving yourself, and you're not very compassionate towards yourself. Therefore, it's difficult to be loving and compassionate towards others, right? So you're not congruent with your core values. So there again is going to create more conflict, and that's why people feel anxious, feel like they lost their mojo, uncertain, lost. So here's something that you really need, is something that's really valuable that you're going to need to learn about change. And it's so important to grow bigger than your challenges or obstacles or unwanted circumstances. This is what people who are consistently, when I use the word successful, people who are congruent, are in flow, this is what they consistently do. Bearing in mind, we got to do the actions to mirror our thoughts, feelings, desires. And they take the step. They still experience the obstacle, they still experience the fear, or they still experience the external circumstances that come up. Still experience it. It doesn't disappear. But instead of shrinking, they make a decision. They choose to grow bigger than their problems. They expand. And I promise you this, when you expand, the solution becomes visible. Richard Branson, give you a story. Usually, I think most people know who he is. He's a hugely successful businessman. Went through this scenario very early in his career. He found a loophole where he didn't have to pay taxes on the store he owned, or at least he thought he did. He ended up being fined an enormous amount of money, with his only option to pay his fine or go to prison. So Branson made what appeared to be a crazy decision. His solution was to actually open another store and make more revenue to pay his fines. When most other people would have given up, because most people would have bought into that story, the sarcasm, the other people's stories. But in that instant, he chose to grow bigger than his problem. And that is partly what makes him so successful today and a contributor to society on a global scale. He gets involved. He is congruent. Now, to make an impact like that, you have to learn to be comfortable with managing your fears and challenges. When you encounter an obstacle, you got to grow bigger than the problem. When you learn to do this, there is nothing out of your reach. There's nothing that you can't achieve. If obstacles and challenges and fear come into play, you need to find new ways to handle them. Ask yourself, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do differently in order to fully step into my new life? The instant you do, the solutions will become visible because you're being congruent. They may well have been there all along, but you probably couldn't see them because you're focused on the conflict. And as you grow bigger than your problems, new opportunities will appear because you're doing things differently. And like we discussed earlier, the goalpost will change. Your new self starts to change. Well, that's the first thing. The second thing I would say to people is fail to succeed. Right? Here's another article that I wrote 20 years ago, I think, right, that I share with people. And when we think about failing to succeed, how many people start out in life hearing the words from your peers or your parents or professionals or school that failure is bad? Matter of fact, schools around the world predominantly are run on a pass-fail system. So if we think about that, is not failure a judgment placed on us by others? The feeling of failure, the recognition of failure that you might recognize that keeps getting in the way, if that's what's getting in the way, is that not a judgment that's placed on you by other people? And really, has it got anything to do with you? So, if so, then what judgment they pass on us is, in truth, is none of our business. It just comes down to how we interpret the result. Or you've heard it say, what other people think about you is none of your business, and that is the truth, because that's judgment placed on them, on you, by them, based on their circumstances, maybe their fears, maybe it's that they're not living their true selves, or they're have a perception of what they think the ideal is, which might not be yours. And if their perception is they're not capable, then share the same with you. And if you take that on board, it becomes your belief. And therefore, you're not being congruent, because still you know in your heart and soul there's something more. There's something more that you can be, do, and have. So ask yourself this question. As long as progress has been made, is it failure? Doesn't have to be perfect all the time. Just as long as you're making some sort of progress. So if progress is being made, is it really failure? Now, we've all heard the story of the great Thomas Edison, right? After conducting thousands of experiments to invent the light bulb with no success, someone asked him, why did he not give up, as he had failed so many times? And it was reported that he said, I haven't failed. I have learned 1,000 ways how not to invent the light bulb. It just comes down to how you look at it. Just comes down to how you look at it. So, in my opinion, there is only one failure, and that's the failure to participate or to quit. Always aim to give 100%. Doing so ensures that you will maximize the learning along the way to your goal, your target, your dream, whatever it is you visualize, whatever it is you feel. Participation requires you to apply yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and yes, spiritually. That way, you will hardwire your nervous system and deepen the learning by making it faster and more effective. This is how you become congruent. Now, a while back, I met up with a client, and the topic of failure did come up. And immediately, this person became argumentative. You might meet somebody like this. Some people who do not believe in failure. Now, some people look at this going, I can't believe Pat Slattery is talking about failure, right? But I want you to understand, for him, the failure implied being a loser. So again, if I asked if he'd ever failed at anything, he admitted that he had. And the next question is what he had learned from the failure. And grudgingly, he admitted that he had learned something. Had it helped him progress to move towards success? And as I asked this question, he had a revelation. So as long as one can apply the learning to move forward, then it is a success. So no matter what the situation, if you give your all and you learn something, then you have succeeded. This means you always win. You are a winner. So what is failure? What's your definition of failure? So here's a new definition. Focused and insightful learning using real experience. So ask yourself, what's happened for you to feel success? And focus on that repeatedly. When you do not get the result you intend, focus on the experience objectively and be persistent in discovering every bit of an insight that you can. And then apply that insight in the future. Then you will be a success. You will have learned to fail to succeed. And then you will be congruent. You will be in flow, moving in the direction that you choose. This makes sense?
I think what stands out for me there is, especially as you say, when people go with the flow and visually I see a river, and that is the tide of life, etc., carrying and going forth. And, to step out, to go off onto, onto your own path. It does take strength. I mean, it's a perceived hump or a perceived bank that you have to cross to get out. And I say perceived, but
But you see, sometimes we say it takes strength, right? And I accept that for part of, because what is the strength? And I know I use that term too, and I say that quite a bit, right? But is there something more, Pete, that doesn't require strength?
I think
Does it?
it's the itching what if. As you say, and I love those things. Saying is, what do you wish for? What are you capable of? Because everyone says, are you capable of more? And everyone goes, well, yeah. Okay, well, why are you not bringing it, right?
Right. So the question is, why not? And you say, I don't have the strength to. Well, that's not the truth. We know that. So what is the truth? If you can tell me the absolute truth, then I might believe it. Because history has proven that anybody can do anything and be anything that they want and choose to become. So we have enough proof, right? So we know it's possible. Now, you see, when we talk about flow and getting into flow, maybe you have to get into a different flow and just accept that it's possible. Accept it and accept ownership and accept that you can do. And again, accepting, just like I've said here, that there will be obstacles and, and experience those obstacles as part of that. So, I will actually go so far to say not even use the word maybe. And I'm going to make what I believe a statement of fact. Is that you have that strength already. You've gotten this far. You've gotten this far. And if you've been focused on challenges and you think you have to overcome obstacles and challenges up to now, and you feel that most of your life has been presented with obstacles and challenges, then my God, you're stronger than most people I know. So you have the strength. But you didn't come this far just to come this far, right? You have the strength. So what's next? And as you say this, Peter, it makes me go back and I reflect on my life. And I would say to you that, we use that term willpower. And I had incredible willpower. Incredible willpower. And I suppose that showed through as a strength. I remember saying to people, once I started focusing on what I really wanted, once I got beyond the obstacles, and trust me, there were lots of obstacles, lots of challenges. And for a time, by the way, I gave in. And there were sometimes even in the middle of this, I tried to get around those obstacles or avoid them, which means I wasn't really congruent with who I was, who I could truly be. And then I found this thing. I thought, okay, I need to be this. And I had this level of willpower. I used to say to people, I'm so determined now, so positive. If you built a brick wall in front of me, I would run through it. And that worked for a while, by the way. Willpower certainly brought me to a certain place. And having that sheer level of willpower to get there served me well. But I will tell you, I discovered there was something more. And I could let go of all that because that willpower, maybe that was the perceived me. Maybe that was the ego, right? I got it in there for you, Pete, the ego. Right? And that perception of who I have to become. That willpower, I have to prove myself. And you see, this is what happens again when you find yourself in there. Is that congruent with who you really want to become? Now, it'll serve you really well, by the way. And you may get to some of the desired outcomes. You start achieving things that you truly want. But there were certain times in my life where on the outside, everything was fantastic, but I wasn't really happy. So I wanted more. I wanted more. I wanted from life what life could bring to me. So if I was to be congruent with that, I had to let go of that willpower, that strength, if you like. Which, of course, the old fear, right? Here's the conflict. Will that leave me vulnerable? Right? And when that happens, of course, the conflict kicks in, and then you start feeding that monster. And you start downloading other programs, and you start seeing yourself as being vulnerable. So you think, I have to be hard-nosed, I have to be tough. Let me say this to you. You know, we've all heard that term, street angel, house devil. You can't take it, and I've used it in the past. I've often said to people, look, whatever's going on in my life, whatever's going on, when I turn off for work, I turn off for work, I leave it outside the door. Well, that's not being congruent. That's just my opinion, by the way. But I don't believe that's being congruent. I want everybody to think of me the same way and know that I show up in the same way for everybody. That doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, Pete. Of course we do. That doesn't mean that you're going to be congruent all of the time. You won't. Especially if your core values are being questioned. And be in an environment where you see people, if you want to care for people, you want to help people, support people, and you're in an environment where not everybody has the same vision, or not everybody is behaving in the same way. And let's say you have somebody that you know who's kind of not a bad person, but they do something bad. And you know about it. And now there's a conflict because you feel uncomfortable and you start wondering whether you can trust them. And then you feel bad because you don't want to hurt them by exposing them. But at the same time, by not exposing them is also in conflict with your core values, right? And here, now you end up in what I call a cluster, mess, right? You end up in a mess. So you have to say to yourself, what would I do in that situation to remain true to me? And in this case, you may be true to yourself by saying, okay, well, I'm going to show compassion to both parties here. And sometimes you go against that. You go against being congruent and you make a choice. But that doesn't mean that you have to suffer all of your life for that. Because that's not congruent. That's living a life of incongruency, if you like. So just, again, back to that judgment and that blame and criticizing yourself for the mistakes, the obstacles, that's just an obstacle that you had to overcome. But you face it and you deal with it, and whatever choice you make, you deal with that choice and you move on and you continue to do as much as you can possibly do and be the best you can be within the time that you can have. And sometimes you'll be challenged, but you shouldn't live in that fear of making mistakes, because you will. And you will make decisions that sometimes are not going to be congruent with your values. And that's where the conflict starts. So sometimes you have to choose to stop that. And if you can't change it, then you can't change what happened before. Change it now. Don't put yourself in that position. Take yourself out of that position. Don't let that become your belief or your reality. Just because you've experienced something in your past, you have been surrounded by an environment or circumstance that has created a belief. And you behaved in a way that you believed was the best way to behave in the past. Everybody has history, by the way. Let it go. Let it go. That's just your past story. Just because momentarily in your life you might have lived an incongruent life, you don't have to continue it. Right? This is where the conflict comes in, and some of the stories that people share. But yeah, but I've made mistakes before, and I've done this, and I didn't do that, and never set well with me. Well, that's okay. Well, we have the power to change it now. And you may do it again. That's okay. You still have the power to change. No, you can't use that as an excuse either, right? Don't say that's like, I mean, disrespectfully, but it's like being a good Catholic or a good Christian, right? And you're saying, I could go and commit a sin, sure, it's all right. I go and start a confession, it'll be all forgiven. I come back and do it again. And that's not living that life, right? And that's just not living that life. So you have that choice, and it's all about choice. And I would say that you choose to flow in the direction that you want to flow in. Now, the third thing I want to share with you is something that I do consistently, because consistency plays a major part in congruency. For me, I got to remind myself every single day, daily, every day, by the way, what you stand for. And I remind myself of what I stand for. And I have every morning in front of me when I read, and here it is right here, my points of culture. And I'm happy to read them. Would you like me to read them, Pete?
Please do.
Right. So I have 14 points of culture that I strive to live my life to be congruent with this. And I believe I am for the majority of the time. Okay. So number one for me is commitment. I give myself and everything I commit to 100% until I succeed. I am committed to the vision and mission and culture and success of Pat Slattery. It's my current and future team and my clients at all times. I always recommend products and services of Pat Slattery International, which is my company, prior to going outside of the company. Second thing is ownership. I am truly responsible for my actions and outcomes and own everything that takes place in my working life. I am accountable for my results, and I know that for things to change, first I must change. And that's really important when it comes to congruency. Integrity. I always speak the truth. What I promise is what I deliver. I only ever make agreements with myself and others that I'm willing and intend to keep. I communicate potential broken agreements at the first opportunity, and I clear up all broken agreements immediately. Fourth one is excellence. Good enough isn't. I always deliver products and services of exceptional quality that add value to all involved for the long term. I look for ways to do more with less and stay on a path of constant and never-ending improvement and innovation. Number 5 is communication. I speak positively of my fellow team members, my clients, and Pat Slattery International in both public and private. I speak with good purpose, using empowering and positive conversation. I never use or listen to sarcasm or gossip. I acknowledge what is being said as true for the speaker at that moment, and I take responsibility for my responses to my communication. I greet and farewell people using their name. I always apologize for upsets first and then look for the solution. And I only ever discuss concerns in private with the person involved. Number 6 is success. I totally focus my thoughts, energy, and attention on the successful outcome of whatever I am doing. I am willing to win and allow others to win, so therefore always creating a win-win. At all times, I display my inner pride, prosperity, competence, and personal confidence. I am a successful person. 7 is education. I learn from my mistakes. I consistently learn, grow, and master so that I can help my fellow team members and clients learn, grow, and master too. I am an educator, and I allow my clients to make their own intelligent decisions about their future, remembering that it is their future. I impact practical and usable knowledge rather than just theory. Number 8 is teamwork. I am a team player and a team leader. I do whatever it takes to stay together and achieve team goals. I focus on cooperation and always come to a resolution, not a compromise. I am flexible in my work and able to change if what I'm doing is not working. I ask for help when I need it, and I am compassionate to others who ask me. Number 9 is balance. I have a balanced approach to life, remembering that my spiritual, social, physical, and family aspects are just as important as my financial and intellectual. I complete my work, so my most important task is first, so I can have quality time to myself and with my family, and also to have more. Number 10 is fun. I view my life as a journey to be enjoyed and appreciated, and I create atmosphere of fun and happiness so all around me enjoy it as well. Number 11 is systems. I always look to a system for a solution. If a challenge arises, I use a system correction before I look for a people correction. I use a system solution in my innovation rather than a people solution. I follow the system exactly until a new system is introduced, and I suggest system improvements at my first opportunity. 12 is consistency. I am consistent in my actions so that my clients and teammates can feel comfortable in dealing with me at all times. I'm disciplined in my work so that my results, growth, and success are consistent. And consistency is something that you will need to be congruent. Number 13, which I actually believe is a major force for congruency, and that's gratitude. I'm truly a grateful person. I say thank you and show appreciation often and in many ways so that all around me know how much I appreciate everything and everyone I have in my life. I celebrate my wins and the wins of my clients and my team and the people. I consistently catch myself and other people doing things right. And finally, abundance. I am an abundant person. I deserve my abundance, and I'm easily able to both give and receive it. I allow abundance in all areas of my life by respecting my own self-worth and that of all others. I am rewarded to the level that I create abundance for others, and I accept that abundance only shows up in my life to the level at which I show up. And if you want to be congruent, you create that statement, remind yourself of what you stand for. You got to be it. And I believe for me, my intention every day is to live by those points of culture. That is who I am. That is what I stand for. And it doesn't mean that sometimes I may slip. Sometimes I may. But I overcome that obstacle. I don't beat myself up. I don't stay there. If that happens, I choose consciously. If something has to change, I change it. And I choose my destination. Therefore, my life flows in the direction that I want it to flow
Mm.
in all areas of life.
I really appreciate you sharing that, and appreciate your clarity. I mean, it's so much so. I mean, that's actually, for anyone that's listening there, and they can follow that on your website, at your patslattery.com. People can actually see that, and I love that you communicate that not just to yourself but to everyone outside of you. So you set the standard.
Well, if again, that's my intention, right?
Mm.
And it's up to me to pay attention to my intention. And like when I talk about putting words and emotions or feelings out there, I have to back it up with action, because my behavior has to mirror exactly what that says
Mm.
in order for me to be congruent. No, as I said, sometimes you're not always going to get it perfect, but I strive to do that, to be that. And sometimes, Pete, I know when I've shared this with some people and I say make the suggestion, they go back to, geez, I'd love to do that, but right, I'd be worried about what people think and what people might say. That's usually what stops people from being congruent, is being challenged by outside influences, that third party conflict. And if that conflict is loud enough and strong enough and it gets in deep enough, people take that on and it becomes their belief. That's when the BS comes in again. Because there's no question, no matter who you are, no matter what your circumstances, you can be, do, and have anything, no matter who you are. So, in my opinion, in order to create flow and be congruent, you need to be conscious of all of your thoughts, all of your words, all of your feelings, all of your actions, and all of your values. You won't be perfect at it. That's okay. But you need to believe wholeheartedly that you can be, do, have all that you desire. And then you got to get involved. You got to show up. Be congruent. Create your own flow.
Makes a lot of sense. What's shot into my head, and I don't know why, is Groundhog Day. And Bill Murray keeps living the same day until he lives by his truth. He lives in congruence, until everything actually he gets it right. It's like, right, go again and again and again until it all comes into play, and that's when he actually starts living.
Yeah, and it even reminds me, I remember like Brian Tracy, and we're talking about, most people, and a lot of people know people who live in this beautiful place. There's a beautiful, beautiful world. It's called the Someday Isle. And when people think about the Someday Isle, it's a wonderful place to live. And the majority of people live there, right? It's someday I'll be the best. Someday I'll live my dream. Someday I'll be the best version of me. Someday I will do whatever it takes to have all that I desire. Someday. Someday is not a day of the week. Today is the only day that matters. Every day, today is the only day that matters. And you can still have a choice. If you choose to live in Someday Isle, that's your choice. You don't need to think, oh, I have all the answers now. You couldn't possibly. But you can choose to live every day thinking, I will look for more. I will look for better ways. You will have to face the obstacles. So I'm going to say that you face them. Face them anyway. Face them anyway. But keep moving forward. Keep being congruent. Create that vision, that life, that dream, whatever it is you desire. Create it. Figure it out. Feel it. share it, and then do whatever it takes to have it. And by doing it, sometimes you have to be it. You can be an amazing person before you achieve all the other material things that you want to achieve. You don't have to be a business owner or a very successful business person or a very successful sports person to be an amazing person. But I can tell you, if you choose to be an amazing person or an outstanding person or a wonderful person or whatever, I assume, based on my experience, that you will probably get better opportunities and get you to where you want to be faster. So be congruent, get involved.
Isn't it funny whether it's giving yourself permission or what is it? As you were talking earlier, I was thinking, why is it that if I turn around and said I'm going to do a master's degree or something, and I'll be doing it for the next 3 years, people would accept that I would work and earn and learn and whatever to qualify for that piece of paper. It would take time and it would do it. And then ultimately I would be there at the end of that path. If you stepped out and said, I'm going to start up a new business or I'm going to do something, I'm going to take a complete change and I'm going to learn something new or whatever else, you're going to get haters, doubters, buts, ifs, coulds thrown at you left, right, and center. And you say, well, listen, I'm only learning, I'm going through this. And whether it's your 10,000 hour principle or whatever you follow, isn't it funny how they're both methods of learning and both methods of education and trying and changing, but you have to have two different connotations.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, Pete, it's not funny. And I know it's a word we use and it's a term we use, but actually the truth is it's not funny. It's, anything that stops people from following their dreams, it's not funny. Right. And, and I mean, people use that term for themselves, dig deeper and say, it's not funny, it's not acceptable. And you don't need anybody else's approval. You don't need anybody's approval if you choose to be congruent with who you are and what you stand for and accept your truth. And that's what we say, then, you've often heard both myself and Donna speak about how serious we are. And we're serious about having fun in our lives. We're serious about turning up for the things we enjoy and turning up for our business. So get serious about it. And, again, when we talk about people, you can look at other people's behaviors. And again, it's, the world is driven by everybody else's fear. Really, most people's worlds, their reality is driven by somebody else's fear. It's usually nothing to do with them. So, ironically, even as you talked about, the education side, and I have no issue with education, right? But I'm a bigger, to me, I think experience is more valuable, but that's just my personal opinion. I do like education. I educate myself every day, right? But I ironically had this conversation with one of my sons, and he was coming up to leaving cert, right? And he doesn't have the desire for school. He just wanted to make money, right? And he's been in part-time jobs while he's gone through school, and leaving cert was coming up, and we're waiting for leaving cert results, and he went looking for a new job. And he just had this conversation with me 2 days ago, because he had a conversation with his boss, because there was 360 applicants for this job, and he got it. And he said he just happened to have a conversation, and of course he was educating me now, right? And he said, that so many people had applied for the job, and he still hadn't got his leaving cert. And the owner of the company said to me, I was kind of a bit reluctant, and I was waiting for the leaving cert. You'll see your leaving cert results, and that was we kind of made a decision. Whoever gets in here, we want to see your education. Whoever decides to apply. And so we interviewed a lot of people, and some people were saying, "Oh, well, my leaving cert is coming, and all this, and I'll wait to see if I get my leaving cert to see what opportunities are available to me," type of thing. He said, where my son, when he went into the interview, he said, "Look, my leaving cert is my leaving cert, and that's going to come whatever it is. But my leaving cert is not going to determine my life. I'm here. I'm looking for work because I want to work. I have experience." And after the interview, 2 days later, my son reached out to them. and dropped him in a message. He said, just want to reach out. I had an interview with you 2 days ago. I haven't heard anything. Just so I can get an understanding of where I let myself down in the interview, because I'm assuming I may not have got the job. Can you tell me what I could have done better in the interview to ensure that I get that job? And the boss said, hire him. He controlled the destination of his flow. He didn't leave it in somebody else's control. He didn't let the fear get in the way. And the education side of it doesn't matter to him, because for the majority of his friends, they're all still looking for work, and they all got fantastic results. Some of them got their colleges they wanted to get into, some didn't. He has his car. He bought his own car. He's 19 years old, paid for his own holidays, and he has money in his pocket. He's self-sufficient. That's his choice. That's who he wants to be. Sometimes he's self-sufficient, right? But the reality is he made choices. He's chosen his destination. He's not letting it to chance. He's not letting anybody get in his way. And sometimes his mates said, oh, don't worry, would you be worried about that? We're all young lads, we could be out, you go out on the weekend. And he said, that's not for me. And he's not allowed, he's not being influenced anymore by other people. He's making his own decisions and his own choices, thankfully. And I would be hopeful, and I would certainly encourage him to continue that without getting in the way, without interfering. That's his life. You know, and people are happy for him. People are happy for him. Now, there are a few people who stayed on and got their education who said, well, if you continued now with your education, you probably would have got a better job. Well, the irony of all that is none of them have a job. Right? But that's not a judgment on them, by the way, Pete. That's just what they believe to be the truth, unfortunately. But someday they'll wake up too. And when they do, he'll be there to support them, because that's what congruency is about. It's not about beating people up. It's not about picking up their faults. It's not even those who challenge you. If you're going to be truly congruent, that's why I say you can't think one way and behave a certain way with certain people and do the opposite with others. You have to be consistent. Somebody challenges you, and people do challenge me, and sometimes it gets under my skin. Of course it does, because it conflicts with one of my core values. Right? So it's going to impact you emotionally as well, no matter who you are. But I think for the majority of times I can overcome it. And, you know, some people may come to me and find a reason to dispute what I say or dispute what I do, and I have an argument with me, and I let them go and think about it for a while. And when they come back to me, I'm happy to have another conversation, but I won't be challenged. I refuse to be challenged. That's not congruent with who I am. I will answer and give my honest feedback on how I see it to be the truth. And I won't waver from that unless I think I may be wrong. So, you know, at the same time, because you will be challenged, and there's usually people that challenge you, I'm really not that bothered. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone, and that's the difference. That's why I don't need that strength anymore. I don't need to have that level of resistance. I don't need to have that level of, you know, being reactive. I don't need to have willpower anymore. I have self-power now. I have congruency. And I wish for everybody who's watching this or listening to this or reading this, we put in words, that they'll find it too. And remember, it's a choice. And you will get blown off track sometimes. That's okay. Don't dwell on it. Go back to your truth. You might strike out sometimes. You might get angry. You might raise your voice. It's not what you want. And people get upset. They go, you see, there you go. I'm after doing something now that I didn't ever want to do. And no, and so what? Let it go. Let it go. Focus on what it is you truly want. Get back on the stream, get back on the boat, or get back on the raft, whatever it is, and you direct it in the way you want it to go. learn from it.
Just as you were talking about exams and stuff like that, the number of people you talk to and, you know, they failed the junior cert or they didn't do well in this exam or that exam, and they carry it. They absolutely carry it.
It's sad. It really is. It's sad, and it's you know, again, you see, when you say that, right, you know, I have such a wish for everybody to be able to step up and be the best version of themselves. And even when you say that, again, there you go. It affects me because it's part of what I value. I value people, and you know, and I value life. And then when I come across that conflict, and it's usually a conflict that am I good enough, am I capable? But I mean, I don't have a formal education. That's not entirely true. I did go back to college very late in life, but I didn't go back because I felt I needed an education. I just wanted a piece of paper to prove that I knew what I was talking about anyway. I thought I thought it would make a difference for me in my business and get me better contracts, better clients. It has played no part. No part. And I've spoken all over the world with some of the greatest minds in the world. In my previous life in my security industry, I've spoken at some of the largest conferences in the world with some of the, my opinion, some of the geniuses of industry. It wasn't my education came from my experience, and the choices that I made to converse that to the world and to be okay with that and to live a congruent life, and not to be driven by fear or other people's opinions. Because to me, that would be living a life of incongruence. And in my opinion, that's where most people are at, unfortunately. But you have the ability to change. You have the ability to step up. You truly do. That is the truth. And I know that everybody knows their truth. The frustration is you don't know how to get there maybe just yet, but keep searching, keep asking the powerful questions, and sometimes reach out and get guidance. I got guidance, by the way. It wasn't that I all of a sudden opened up and something magic appeared and the clouds parted and a ray of sunshine came down on top of me, right? I got guidance. I searched for guidance. I found people who were living that life. I learned from them. I allowed them to educate me. I paid attention. I didn't assume that I knew it all. I paid attention to those people who were giving me good counsel. So you know what? If you know there's something, reach out. It doesn't matter who you are, you will need guidance. I still have my people that I reach out to make sure I stay on this path that I'm on. I'm absolutely thrilled that I do, but not only that I'm actually okay with being taught and reaching out for help and living by my points of culture and showing up every day for what I stand for.
Says a lot. It's congruence.
Yeah.
Being congruent.
Absolutely.
Pat, that's been outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it.
Until the next time.
Next week. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Take care.